Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Mark was never the type to distrust people. He grew up learning that loyalty was proven day by day, not through pretty promises. He carried that belief into running his restaurant, where all the staff had the freedom to speak up, suggest ideas, and share opinions. The same spirit he brought into his home, where he tried to keep things harmonious, even with the exhaustion of waking up early, dealing with suppliers, taxes, customers, and still having the patience to handle the small crises in his marriage. Denise had seemed more distant lately. She said she needed space, that she was stressed, that she just wanted to breathe for a while. Mark believed her. He wasn't controlling. He trusted. And that's what made everything harder to swallow. On that Tuesday, a supplier canceled the meat delivery at the last minute. With few orders on the books, Mark decided to close earlier than usual. It was just after 2 in the afternoon when he got home. Olivia was still at school, and Denise supposedly had gone to the market. But as soon as he opened the door, he noticed something was off. There was a man's jacket hanging on the chair in the living room that wasn't his. Denise's heels were in the hallway. He walked upstairs quietly, almost in a daze. When he pushed open the bedroom door, he saw what no husband should ever see, Denise with a younger man, laughing, hugging like it was their place. Time stopped for a moment. Mark's heart was racing, his stomach twisted. He pulled out his phone and started recording. The guy jumped back in surprise, and when he tried to grab the phone from him, Mark reacted. The fight was quick. Mark pinned the guy down and pushed him out of the room. Tyler, shirtless and red-faced, shouted that it wasn't what it looked like. Mark ignored him. He opened the front door and pointed outside. Tyler left cursing, pulling on his pants in a rush. Denise was trying to get dressed when Mark went back into the room. She was crying, begging him to listen, saying everything was more complicated than it seemed. Mark stood there in front of her and asked only one question: how many months? She hesitated. Looked down. Said 6. Mark just shook his head, as if that confirmed everything he needed to know. He said there was no more room for conversation. You're not going to live here anymore. Pack your things today. She tried to protest, asked about Olivia, but Mark was direct. Olivia doesn't deserve to grow up with lies in her house. You'll stay with your sister for a few days. After that, we'll see what happens. And he left, without listening to anything else. He went to the police station and filed a report. Told them everything. Showed the video. Said the man had broken into his house and tried to attack him. The officer who handled his case asked if he wanted to press formal charges. He said yes. After that, he stopped by the restaurant, talked to the manager, and told him he would be taking some time off. He needed to deal with personal matters. When he returned home, Denise already had 2 suitcases packed. She tried to justify herself again, said she was confused, that the marriage had grown cold, that Tyler made her feel alive. Mark listened silently. When she finished, he replied, "Then you have to live with that choice. The door is right there." In the late afternoon, Olivia came home from school. She entered cheerful, as always. She had drawn a poster for the cultural fair project. Mark tried to smile, but the pain still throbbed in his chest. He sat with her in the living room and explained in the lightest way he could. Told her that her mom needed to stay with her aunt for a while because things between them were difficult. Olivia asked if they were going to split up. Mark took a deep breath and answered that some changes were happening, but that she didn't need to worry, because he'd always be there for her. She didn't cry. She just leaned her head on his shoulder and stayed there, silent. In that gesture, Mark understood that he had to be strong, for himself and for her. Later, he made her favorite dinner. Macaroni and cheese. They ate together, watched TV, and when Olivia went to bed, he stayed in the living room, staring at the emptiness. For the first time since it all happened, he cried. It wasn't a cry of despair. It was a quiet mourning, from someone whose heart had been broken and still needed to stand up the next day and move forward. That night, he slept in his own room. He washed the sheets, changed the comforter, and opened the window. He needed air, even though it felt heavy. As he lay down, he stared at the ceiling for long minutes, thinking about everything that had gone unnoticed. The skipped dinners. The hidden messages. The Sundays when Denise said she was visiting her sister, but came back with a different perfume. And even with all that pain, he felt a strange kind of relief. The truth had arrived. Raw, dirty, violent. But it was there. And now, it was up to him to start over. Mark spent the following days walking a road in ruins. Every conversation with his lawyer was a reminder that the life he had tried to hold together had already crumbled. Alan Green was practical, straightforward, and that helped keep the focus. While Mark gathered documents, bank statements, and message records, Denise had already hired her own lawyer. She tried, through him, to twist the situation. Said she was a victim of a cold marriage, that Mark emotionally distanced himself, that the home had become a place of constant tension. And the hardest part, she asked for full custody of Olivia, plus the right to remain in the house, arguing that the girl needed her mother and that the restaurant kept the father too busy. When Alan received the official petition, he took a deep breath before showing it to Mark. She had thrown everything she had. Tried to paint a picture of neglect, as if Mark were an absent father, someone who prioritized work and put his daughter second. Mark read everything in silence. He didn't need to say what he felt, it was written all over his face. This was more than marital infidelity, it was an attempt to take away what he loved most based on calculated lies. Alan advised them to counterattack with evidence. Mark then opened his banking history, showed transfers to hotels on dates Denise claimed she was with her sister, and of course, the video he recorded when he caught the affair. Alan organized the documents and pieced together the puzzle of the truth. It was a race against time, but also against hypocrisy. A few days later, Denise showed up at Olivia's school unannounced. She asked to talk to her daughter, tried to convince her that the father was blocking contact. When Olivia told Mark, he immediately contacted the school administration and requested that any visits be approved by court order. Alan reinforced this during the preliminary hearing, and the judge understood the concern. Denise got angry, tried to turn everything into another emotional argument, saying she was being unfairly separated from her daughter. But the facts started to weigh heavily. The judge wanted to understand why a mother asking for sole custody had hotel expense records while the child was at school or at the grandparents' house. She couldn't answer firmly. She avoided. Said she was confused. The judge, a direct man, observed with firm eyes. He asked for the couple's expense receipts, compared the versions presented, and saw inconsistencies in Denise's words. During this process, something unexpected happened. One night, the neighbors called Mark saying the restaurant doors were forced open. He rushed there and found broken glass, graffiti on the walls, and part of the counter destroyed. The security cameras captured everything. 3 young men, hooded, broke in, knocked things over, and left a message painted on the wall in red ink: "This is just the beginning." Alan immediately requested a police investigation. When the faces of the intruders were identified, there was a shock. 2 of them were friends of Tyler. One of them had liked photos of the couple on social media weeks before. This became another accusation. The property damage added to the previous invasion charge, and Alan decided to also file a civil lawsuit for emotional alienation. It was unusual, but in cases with such clear evidence, it was possible to legally hold someone responsible for intentionally interfering in another person's marriage. Denise became cornered. She started missing hearings, citing anxiety attacks. Sent medical certificates, asked for delays. Mark, on the other hand, remained present at every step, even though his heart was broken. He knew this effort wasn't for revenge, but for justice. Olivia continued going to school normally, participating in activities, but the sparkle in her eyes had faded. Mark noticed. He began picking her up every day, even when he was buried in work. On Thursdays, he took her for ice cream, and on Sundays, they went to the movies. He wanted to show her that despite everything, the love he felt for her was what kept him standing. At home, he adjusted the routine so she never felt alone. When Olivia asked why her mother acted that way, he simply said that sometimes people get lost, but that never justified hurting others. Meanwhile, Tyler's reputation started to crumble. His company found out about the legal proceedings. HR called a meeting, and a few days later, he was fired. He tried to argue it was persecution, said he was being targeted in a conspiracy. But videos of the restaurant invasion circulated among locals. Comments piled up online. He tried to erase the traces, but the internet never forgets. Denise also started being avoided by old friends. The excuses that once sounded convincing lost strength. People weren't sure what was worse, the infidelity itself or the attempt to destroy the father of her own child with cold lies. The process dragged on, but each new hearing made it clear to the judge that Denise had crossed lines. And the more she tried to defend herself, the more exposed her choices became. In the middle of all this, Mark also had to deal with the challenges of keeping the restaurant running. He gathered the team and told them what had happened. He asked for patience and commitment. The employees united. They organized a group to repaint the walls, replaced the glass, and an old customer donated new tables. It was a small victory, but it meant a lot. Mark realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. And even without meaning to, he started becoming a respected figure. Some customers left notes of support with their payments. Others brought flowers, books, or even small drawings done by kids who frequented the restaurant. The pain still lived in his chest, but something new was starting to emerge. A strange feeling, almost uncomfortable, like the suffering was making room for something different. Still undefined. But alive. Tyler never had the emotional structure to deal with consequences. When he was exposed, he lost his job and began to be seen with suspicion by neighbors, colleagues, and even family members. The firing hit him in a way that transformed him into someone else. He stopped going to the same places, avoided contacts, and started living with suppressed anger. He fed the idea that Mark was the one to blame for the end of his romance with Denise, for his tarnished image, and for the estrangement from his parents. He invented a script in which he was the victim of a bitter and vengeful man. And the more he dwelled on it, the stronger the desire to settle the score in his own twisted way. With the process ongoing and the public exposure of events, Tyler disappeared for a while. Denise, when questioned in hearings, said she no longer had contact with him. It was hard to know if it was true or just another attempt to save her own image. What no one expected was that Tyler, in silence, was planning something beyond provocation or embarrassment. He wanted to hit Mark where it hurt the most. And for him, that spot was the restaurant. The place that survived infidelity, defamation, and vandalism from his friends. A symbol of resilience that, for Tyler, needed to be destroyed completely. On a Friday morning around 3 a.m, the alarm system went off. Mark, who was sleeping at home with Olivia, received a notification on his phone. He got up and accessed the camera via the app. The image showed a man in a cap and mask forcing the back door with a metal tool. He was fast, aggressive, determined. Mark called the police and left in his car. When he arrived, the police were already on site. The intruder had been detained trying to flee through the back. It was Tyler. He had a backpack containing gloves, gasoline, and a lighter. The plan was clear. His intention went beyond vandalism. It was total destruction. Mark watched everything with a mix of anger and amazement. Tyler was handcuffed, placed in the patrol car, and taken directly to the station. His clean record now included forced entry, attempted arson, and possession of flammable material with criminal intent. The case was immediately taken to court. The judge, upon learning of the intrusion and the criminal intent recorded on video, ordered Tyler's immediate arrest, without bail. The seriousness of the facts combined with recent history made it clear that he represented a real threat. Protective measures for Mark and Olivia were also decreed, preventing any form of approach, even through third parties. The incident further strengthened Mark's position in the divorce process, clearly showing the dangerous environment Denise had exposed her daughter to by getting involved with an unstable and dangerous person. The fallout from the attempted intrusion spread quickly. Restaurant customers, who already knew part of the story, began mobilizing in support. An informal campaign on social media raised donations for enhanced security at the location, and an old supplier offered new monitoring systems. A group of parents from Olivia's school sent letters and gifts for her, saying they were on her side. The town, which had previously just watched, began speaking out. The restaurant became a symbol of dignity. Mark, without needing to say a word, became seen as a man facing tragedy without losing his honor. At the next hearing, Denise tried to shift the focus. She said Tyler acted on his own, that she never encouraged anything, that she had already distanced herself from him. The judge listened, but the facts spoke louder. Trying to justify the unjustifiable only isolated her more. Mark stayed silent for much of the session, but at the end, when given the chance to speak, he spoke clearly. He said his intention had never been war, that he was seeking only a safe and fair environment to raise his daughter. And that everything he did was for Olivia, so she could grow up knowing that character isn't negotiable. The judge closed the session with a firm voice, stating that, in light of all the facts, primary custody would remain with the father, the child's routine would continue as before, and protective restrictions against Tyler's ex-lover would be reinforced. With the process over and Tyler in prison, Mark felt for the first time in a long time that he could breathe with some peace. After the ruling, the judge allowed Denise the right to visit Olivia every 2 weeks, but always under supervision, at a family coexistence center designated by the court. The first times were tense. Olivia came home after these visits with a confused look, sometimes too quiet, other times irritable for no reason. Mark tried to respect his daughter's space and, with psychological guidance, understood that she needed time to process everything. Denise tried to seem present, brought gifts and stories, but never clearly acknowledged what had caused it. She avoided talking about the past and treated everything as if it were just a bad phase that had passed. Olivia noticed this. Over time, the visits became emotionally distant. She started going only out of obligation, always accompanied by a professional from the center. After several months, she began to ask if it was really necessary to keep going. Mark, with a heavy heart, said yes, that it was important to maintain some connection, however small. But the bond between mother and daughter was weakening, and nothing forced seemed to work. And so, those visits that initially carried expectations became just another item on Olivia's agenda, as she continued growing with premature maturity, while her mother insisted on pretending she still occupied the same space as before. Time passed, and on a normal day, after leaving a meeting with the restaurant accountant, Mark ran into Claire. She was at the local stationery store, choosing school supplies for her nephew. They had known each other by sight for years, exchanged quick greetings at school fairs and community events, but had never really talked. Claire had a direct and calm manner, and they ended up laughing about a silly problem with missing school labels. Mark made a comment about how that kind of task never seemed to end, and she said that even without children, she already knew the chaos of helping her sister with 2 kids. They exchanged a few words, laughed again, and left the store at the same time. It was her who said first, "If you ever want to chat, have coffee. I'm always there at the corner, in that little cafe." He thanked her and thought about it longer than he expected. A few days later, he passed by the cafe and saw Claire sitting there with her laptop open. She was focused, but looked up and smiled when she saw him. He went in, ordered coffee, and struck up a conversation. It was natural, without any forced vibe. They talked about work, about the town, about how certain phases of life empty us out from the inside without us noticing. Claire shared that she had also gone through a divorce, quieter but equally painful. She said she learned to value the people who stay when everything falls apart. Mark listened, without telling much of his own story. He was tired of reopening wounds. He just wanted to listen and be there, without rushing, without obligations. Over time, the two began to meet more often. There was no set commitment, but the conversations gained space, and both felt comfortable. Claire met Olivia one afternoon when she stopped by the restaurant to pick up an order. The girl was at the register, reading a book, and Claire complimented her choice. Olivia, curious about the world around her, asked, "Are you my dad's friend?" Claire answered yes, with a sincere smile. And that was enough to start a conversation between the two. After that day, Claire started coming around more, sometimes to eat, sometimes just to chat. She never invaded anything. She was kind and observant. When Olivia began including her name in the little stories of the day, Mark understood that something new was beginning to grow there. Deciding to move in together came slowly. Claire already had her life in order, her apartment, her routine. Mark didn't feel the need to change everything at once. But the nights she spent there started to become more frequent, and breakfast with the three of them became common. Olivia seemed comfortable, secure. And that was what mattered most. When she asked if Claire was going to move in for good, Mark said maybe, if everyone was okay with it. Olivia shrugged and replied, "She makes you smile more." That was enough. This new chapter brought calm. Claire helped with restaurant ideas, Olivia grew surrounded by stable affection, and Mark, even still marked by everything he had lived through, felt that he could finally walk without the weight of distrust. Denise showed up unannounced one autumn afternoon while Claire was helping Olivia with homework in the living room. Mark answered the door, and for a moment, he barely recognized the woman in front of him. She was visibly thinner, with deep dark circles and the expression of someone who had lost more than she wanted to admit. She asked for a few minutes. Claire, sensing the situation, took Olivia to her room without questioning. She didn't come to ask for custody or discuss anything legal. She came to apologize. She said she had distanced herself from everything and everyone after Tyler was arrested. She admitted she had lost friendships, the trust of her family, and finally, even her pride. She recognized that she had wronged Mark, her daughter, and herself. She cried. Said she knew there was no going back, but needed to look him in the eye and acknowledge the destruction she had caused. Mark listened in silence. He didn't feel anger or pity. He just felt a strange compassion for someone who now understood the damage she had done. He said he forgave her, not for her, but for himself and Olivia. That forgiveness was necessary for all of them to move forward in peace. But he made it clear, life had moved on. And she was no longer part of it. Denise thanked him, asked to see her daughter one day, if she wanted, and left without drama. 5 years after that storm, Mark and Claire married in a simple ceremony, just for the closest people. Olivia carried the rings. At the end, in an improvised short speech, she looked at her father and said, "You taught me that being strong isn't about yelling or fighting back. It's about protecting in silence." Mark wiped a tear and held Claire's hand. In that moment, he understood that everything he had suffered led him exactly to that place. To a quiet love. To a life he hadn't planned, but that, in the end, was exactly what he deserved. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.